Hello friends, welcome all of you to my new series of lecture sessions on drugs acting on central nervous system. So in this we'll discuss in detail about sedatives and hypnotics, a very important chapter. Before going into the actual topic, let's see what exactly is a sedative and hypnotic. Sedatives and hypnotics are sleep inducing agents. They belong to category CNS depressants category. We also call them as sleeping pills. So why sleep is very important for us? Let's see. Sleep is far from simple absence of wakefulness. Sleep is an active, regulated, and metabolically distinct state, and it is essential for health and well-being. We all know that. So what happens if there is a problem with sleep? So one of the major problem is insomnia. This is nothing but a difficulty in falling asleep and staying asleep. Both are very important for us. So here, why people used to face difficulty in falling asleep or staying asleep? Let's see. One is physiological problems can be there, like there is some problem like epilepsy or certain cancers. These problems will create a lot of inconvenience to the patient, so that he is deprived of sleep. The second thing is psychological. If the psychological state of a person is entirely different on the other side, like if they are highly depressed or highly active, like psychotic case, in both the cases the patient will suffer from sleeplessness. He finds it really difficult to fall asleep. Second one is emotional and stressful situations. These are very common problems which we see even in normal people also, like emotional problems, like loss of a person, loss of anything valuable in life will sometimes significantly affect the emotional state and cause sleeplessness. And second one is stress. Work related stress is one of the very no, you can easily see that in current society, where workload shrinks the number of hours a person spent in sleeping. The last one is a physical problem, like both like a physical damage, like in case of surgery or a bone fracture like that, or inconvenience in sleeping environment problem. Let's say if you are asked to sleep in a noisy condition, it will be really difficult for you. So in these conditions, a person may need assistance from external agents for sleep. So characteristics of ideal hypnotics and sedatives. So what type of characteristics are needed? Let's see. It should induce sleep that exactly resembles natural sleep. Natural sleep, as I told you earlier, it is a highly active condition where so many things happens in your body. So no drowsiness or sedation in daytime. So after the sleep is over, the person should feel like rejuvenated, fresh, and there should not be any kind of after effects. Hangover, we call it as hangover. Okay. So no dependence. Okay, because if a person is suffering from sleeplessness, some kind of a problem, so these molecules, these drugs should cure it, so that further there should not be any kind of a dependence, or withdrawal symptoms should not be there. No drug interactions, okay, because if some cases, some people like hypertension, or some people suffering from epilepsy or anything else like that, there should not be any kind of a drug interactions between those drugs and sedatives and hypnotics. It should not cause rebound insomnia after discontinuation is a very important point which we have to recognize, because once the medication is stopped, there should not be any kind of incidence of rebound insomnia, means the person will become even more insomnic. That's the problem. Okay, the next one is safe and inexpensive. Okay, inexpensive we can understand, but what about safety? Safety means the drug should have appreciable therapeutic window. Means in case of sedatives and hypnotics, one problem will arise, typical problem. It is no partial memory loss, like the person forgets that he has taken a tablet, then it will switch on some kind of situation, we call it as automation, where the patient will again consume the tablet, will forget it again, and he will again take the tablet. So this repetition will will cause some kind of condition, we call it as drug overdose, and this overdose may often kill the person. So this is a possibility. So that's the reason why safety and inexpensiveness both are very important for us. Before going into the actual subject, let's see in brief about the sleep wake centers that we have in our brain. So one of the mechanism we have for wakefulness is ascending arousal system. So in our brain, ascending arousal system actually initiates its signaling in two ways. One is in the monoamine pathway, the second one is cholinergic pathway. In the monoamine pathway, cell groups in the upper brain stem, so this is the brain stem, so upper brain stem, like locus coeruleus, that contain monoamine neurotransmitters like norepinephrine, serotonin, dopamine, and histaminergic neurotransmitters over here. So here we have TMN, where histamine is there. In Raphe nucleus we have 5-hydroxytryptamine, and locus coeruleus we have norepinephrine. So these nucleus enters these signals enters the hypothalamus over here, hypothalamus, like tubomammillary neurons and ventrolateral preoptic area and perifornical neurons, and then they will go into the cortical regions. So these will not enter into thalamus. The remaining cells picks up the inputs, also picks up the inputs from nerve cells that contain peptides like orexin or hypocretin or melanin concentrating hormones like this one, perifornical neurons over here. So all these signals will join and they will go into the cortical regions. These inputs will traverse the basal forebrain, and then the second lane is upper brain stem, and from cholinergic neurons that we have over here, we call them as pedunculopontine and lateral dorsal tegmentum. So these are the two centers where acetylcholine actually modulates the signaling mechanism. So this actually activates the thalamus that are responsible for maintaining the transmission of sensory information to cerebral cortex. So ultimately the inputs from cells containing acetylcholine and GABA are activated over here in the cortical region, and then diffusively activate the nerve cells and prepare them for the interpretation of analysis of incoming sensory information. So that is the way how the signals that are originating on the on this region, okay, so they enter into the cortical region and then activate appropriate center over here. That's the way how arousal system works. In case of sleep generation, so this one ventral lateral preoptical nerve system over here is actually the critical area which gets the signaling, which will actually generate the signals which will enter into the remaining areas in the central nervous system, and then they will modulate the activity in such a manner that the outputs are sent to the forebrain, including activation of the cholinergic pathways, to the thalamus to activate the electroencephalogram. Okay, so the signals that you see are actually activated. Inputs from the circadian system that allow the wake sleep system to synchronize with the external day and night cycle. This also is done. The sleep generating system also includes neurons in the pons that intermittently switch from NREM to REM sleep over the course of night. So this is also done, and these neurons send outputs to the lower brain stem and spinal cord that cause actually the muscle atonia, muscle relaxation, REMs, and autonomic nervous system activity that causes the REM sleep. Okay, so the signals that are generated over here are received by different centers over here, and then they actually control the sleep cycle. So if you see here the kind of neurotransmissions that you have seen, the 5-HT is there, norepinephrine is there, histamine is there, dopamine is there, acetylcholine is there, and then various protein neurotransmitters were also involved over here. So among all, let's say for example 5-HT, histamine, norepinephrine, these are all activating, dopamine, these are all activating centers, whereas GABA is a deactivating center. So if you see the kind of receptor distribution throughout the brain, 60% of the receptors are under control of gamma aminobutyric acid. The remaining 40% will have monoamine receptors and as well as the protein peptide receptors, etc. So here GABA plays a major role in controlling the system. Okay, so GABA acts as an inhibitory system to control the entire nervous system. Sleep itself is not a homogeneous process. There exist two fundamentally distinct types of sleep. Sleep, rapid eye movement sleep as well as non-rapid eye movement sleep. And what exactly is the role of sleep in controlling our biochemistry? So this is one example. Some hormones are little influenced by sleep versus wakefulness, including adrenocorticotropic hormone, cortisol, and melatonin. But some are strongly influenced by sleep, such as thyroid stimulating hormone, prolactin, and some are affected by particular sleep stages, that is such as growth hormones. So that's the reason why we need quality sleep, and it should include REM as well as non-REM. Okay, because all these are highly essential for maintenance of our biochemistry. Our health and disease status is actually under control of sleep cycles also. So that's the reason why scientists from time immemorial were looking for substances to modulate our sleep cycle. So let's see a little bit on evolution of hypnotics and sedatives. So if you go into the history, natural products dominated our health management system from the beginning. The extracts are from hyoscine, scopolamine, morphine, and ethanol have been used from ages, okay, in the maintenance of our modulation of sleep-wake cycle for inducing sleep. And later on in the 19th century, we have chloral hydrate is one of the preliminary agents that were used as sleep-inducing agents. And then entered paraldehyde. And later on, scientists are also found a very good influence of bromides on CNS, and potassium bromide became a clinical agent. And later on, in the same period, two organic compounds so this one, if you see this is urea. So this is what we call it as diethyl acetyl urea. This is a sulfuron. The common name for this one is a sulfuron. So these two agents, though all these agents are toxic, these are the only chemicals available at that time to induce sleep. So they were used clinically. And one very important milestone in the history of hypnotics and sedatives is synthesis of barbituric acid by von Baer and development of barbituric acid analogs. Adolf von Baer, who is the founder of Bayer Pharmaceutical Company, he synthesized barbiturate in 1864 from malonic acid obtained from apples and urea obtained from animal material were fused together to obtain barbiturate. And they did not see its biological activity, but one of the scientists working with Bayer company, Joseph von Mering, who is a pharmacologist who studies effect of various chemicals on animals, he actually is particularly interested in this compound, and then he observed that both the CNS depressant compounds over here, both diethyl acetyl urea as well as sulfuron, both are having ethyl substitutions. So in collaboration with Emil Fischer, who is also working on the similar kind of works, he synthesized diethyl barbituric acid. Okay, of course I hope you remember this one, the scientist Emil Fischer, who is actually well known for structural elucidation of glucose, for which he was awarded Nobel Prize in 1905. He actually synthesized diethyl barbituric acid, and it has shown excellent hypnotic and sedative activity. So thereby it was approved for clinical usage in the year 1904. Later on, they synthesized phenobarbital. One of the ethyl group is replaced by benzene ring, and it became a phenobarbital, and it became gold standard at that time in 1912, at that period. And it became so popular that millions of people were treated with phenobarbital at that time itself. Thousands of molecules were synthesized, which are with several variations on the structure of barbiturates, and which resulted in compounds several types of compounds that we are going to see in the other chapters related in the CNS activity. But the unfortunate thing is phenobarbital, barbituric acids became so popular in the period 1910 to 1925. But they became very unpopular because of their very thin therapeutic window. In fact, the history says like Joseph von Mering as well as Emil Fischer, who are the discoverers of barbituric acid derivatives, were actually taking this drug, and then Joseph von Mering died in 1907 and Emil Fischer died in 1926. The reasons, as history says, is overdoses of barbituric acids. As I told you earlier, safety is very important because barbituric acids, they cause short-term memory loss, where if you have taken this drug, you forget that you have taken this drug and again you will be forced to take another tablet. So in that way, this procedure or this thing is repeated till you fall asleep. Okay, so this often led to barbiturate poisoning. Okay, several famous people, including Hollywood actors died because of this, and it became so unpopular. So after the death of Emil Fischer, from 1930 onwards, the regulations were implemented to restrict the usage of barbiturates. Benzodiazepines, beginning of a new era. Scientists working in Roche company, Dr. Leo H. Sternbach, and their team were given with a problem to discover novel agents for CNS depressant activity. Okay, so sedative hypnotic activity, because barbituric acids, though they are very good, but they are leading to drug poisoning. So that's the reason why they wanted to have novel drugs in this category. But at that time, it all happened in 1950s, where there is hardly any information regarding brain and its chemical communication. The receptors concept, though it was there is no technique available for complete study of receptors in central nervous system. So that's why, because Sir Sternbach is actually a very good organic chemist, so they designed a program with certain rules where they wanted to have a compound which is relatively unexplored and which should be readily accessible. It should give the possibility of a multitude of variations and transformations, and it should offer some kind of a challenge, a challenging chemical problem, and it should look as if it could lead to biologically active products. If you look at all these 5 rules, it looks like an academic problem, academic PhD work. But actually these are the rules which were utilized as guiding principles for designing, for selecting compounds as well as designing synthetic pathways. So here they initiated one research work with his own postdoctoral problem. So during his postdoctoral research work, Sternbach worked on a problem of synthesizing dyes from aniline derivatives. So here he has taken aminoacetophenone. So where he synthesized the first aminoacetophenone hydrazone. Okay, so this is a hydroxylamine. So hydrozones are synthesized, and this, when they heat it with what is this one? The acetic anhydride, acetic acid, and HCl. This mixture is what we call it as Beckmann mixture. So when they heated it with this Beckmann mixture, they are supposed to get oxadiazepines. Okay, oxadiazepines. So they thought like, so they have synthesized these compounds and they have reported it also, thinking like they got this compound, because when they were doing their research work, the kind of chemical analysis they do is classical chemical analysis, where they perform certain chemical tests, elemental analysis, and if possible UV analysis as well as infrared spectral analysis. With these, they confirmed this structure and published the work also. And when Sternbach again taken up this scheme, and when they were synthesizing, they were surprised to see that the compounds are not actually coming. And when they have done comprehensive structure analysis work, they found like they are actually getting phenoxylenes, not oxadiazepines. Okay, so this is again another a very big, it should be considered as a very big setback, but Sternbach has taken this one with his interest in organic chemistry, because quinoxalins again are also very important molecules. At that time they were novel. Okay, not much research work has happened. So what he has done is he designed this scheme where benzophenones were taken, amino benzophenones, instead of methyl here you can keep a benzene, so that when you have performed this reaction you are supposed to get this phenyl quinoxalin. So if you have got this phenyl quinoxalin N-oxides, you can halogenate this methyl and then you can transform this, you can perform nucleophilic substitution over here, so that more diversified libraries can be generated. So this is their idea, and they had actually synthesized hundreds of compounds thinking like they are getting this compound. At that time, please remember that the kind of facilities available over there are very much limited, and NMR and mass spectral analysis are not very popularly used for structure analysis of complex heterocyclic compounds. Largely they use degradative analysis or physicochemical analysis for confirming structures. So after synthesizing hundreds of compounds and screening them, they were really disappointed at the results, and they wanted to shut down. So shut down the project, and during that process they found like one compound by code RO50690. This compound was not submitted. This compound was actually synthesized by treating this halogenated compound with methylamine. This is actually the first compound they had synthesized, but they did not submit this one for the activity screening. And then they have submitted this compound, and then they found that this compound is excellent as far as the activity is concerned. It is not as good as barbiturate as well as sedation is concerned, but it has shown excellent muscle relaxant activity, anxiolytic activity, etc. Okay, so when they were synthesizing, because it's a very good molecule, so they wanted to study it further. So when they have done the complete structure analysis, they were surprised to see that the compound is actually a diazepine. Okay, so through some kind of a rearrangement they got this compound, and then they were pretty surprised to see this compound, and their structure was elucidated by chemical degradation, and this gave them a pathway to synthesize a huge library of diazepines were synthesized, and Sternbach has contributed more than half a dozen drugs of diazepine class to the world. And it all happened in 1955, because Librium was approved for clinical usage in 1955-56. That is the period. From then onwards, diazepines dominated the market. So friends, this is the way how diazepine discovery happened. As I told you, both barbituric acids and diazepines are easy to access. So that's why thousands of molecules were synthesized and screened. Several types of molecules were tried, and which resulted in a very good list of a handful of molecules were identified to possess sedative and anti-hypnotic activity. So let's see the classification of those drugs. First one is barbituric acids. As I told you, thousands of molecules of thousands of barbituric acids were synthesized and screened. So these efforts resulted in 4 types of barbituric acids: long acting, which work for more than 24 hours, intermediate acting 8 to 24 hours, short acting 3 to 8 hours, and ultra short acting less than 3 hours. In fact, ultra short acting category, they work for only half an hour or 1 hour. It all depends on the dose they are using. In long acting, we have phenobarbital. We have in intermediary amylobarbital. In third category, we have secobarbital, and third one is thiopental sodium. And the next category, very interesting and very important category, is diazepines. So here we have 3 types of diazepines are there depending on their structure. So in benzodiazepine category, we have diazepam, where this is the diazepine structure. The second one is triazolobenzodiazepine. So here at the N1 position and C2 position, here we have first and second position, we have a triazole ring. This is a triazole ring. The next one is imidazole containing diazepines. imidazolobenzodiazepines. We have, this is the midazolam, and here we have imidazole ring is there. And the next category is acyclic nitrogen containing derivatives. Here we have urethanes like ethionamide, carbamates like meprobamate. This is a carbamate ester. The next one is simple amides like oxamide. So this is a simple aliphatic acid amide. The next one is cyclic nitrogen containing derivatives like amides or amides like glutathione. If you closely observe the glutathione structure, it resembles phenobarbital, where it lost one nitrogen over here and C double bond O from here. In quinazolines, methaqualone, acetylenic derivatives, hexapropamate, this is the drug, and aldehydes and alcohols, where we have ethichlorovinol, this is an alcohol. Of course, it also possesses acetylenic part. Paraldehyde is also there, and several other miscellaneous compounds are also being used, like inorganic salts like KBr, and plant extracts like Rauwolfia serpentina, ashwagandha, etc. And ethanol is also used. Except barbiturates and diazepines, the remaining compounds are almost obsolete, and very few drugs are still in use for specific purposes. And next, let's see the mechanism of action we have for these sedative hypnotics. As I told you, in CNS, 60% of the receptor population is actually GABAergic. Okay, so GABA is the actual modulator, and GABA is an inhibitory neurotransmitter. GABA is actually an ionophore, ion channel. So GABA is a transmembrane protein. We have 5 units will be there. 5 protein units will be there, which this pentamer will have an opening in the middle, which acts as an ion channel. So to look into its details, every one of these protein, okay, in this pentamer contains 4 transmembrane units will be there, which are connected to the 5th unit from extracellular region. Okay, so all these 4 are like M1, M2, M3 and M4, M1, M2, M3 and M4, and then they will have extracellular unit as well as intracellular domains will be there. This extracellular domain and intracellular domain will have contacts in such a manner that the 5 units together, they act as an ion channel. So scientists found like 3 different types of arrangements were observed. Based on that, the proteins are classified into alpha, beta and gamma. Within alpha, we also have alpha 1, alpha 2, etc. Subclassifications are also there. Okay, so in this way, pentamer is actually obtained. So in case of GABA A, we have 2 beta units, 2 alpha units and 1 gamma unit will be there, and the space between gamma and alpha proteins will have benzodiazepine receptor pocket, and between alpha and beta subunits will have GABA receptor pocket, and on this side alpha and beta subunits, and towards the interior of the receptor of the channel, you will find the receptor pocket for barbituric acids. Okay, so this is the way how architecture of GABA A receptor pocket is there. Now let's see how it works. As I told you, the GABA A receptor contains 2 alpha units, 2 beta units and 1 gamma unit. And GABA attaches onto the receptor pocket between alpha and beta on this side. Then as it is a chloride ion channel, it opens up the channel and then chloride ion influx will happen, which will hyperpolarize the cell, means deactivate the cell. And barbituric acids actually act on a receptor pocket near to GABA channel, so that they open up the channel, so they allow the chlorides to pass through the channel. And benzodiazepine receptor pocket is there between alpha and gamma subunits. And if you wanted to see a little bit about the GABA A receptor subpopulations, so we can see subunit composition. Different types of compositions were found in different areas. Okay, so when GABA A receptor in the when they were activated, commonly observed outputs are sedation and anticonvulsant activity. But when forebrain and spinal cord, in these areas, when GABA receptors are activated, anxiety and muscle relaxant activities are observed. And cortical activity, because cortex controls all your limbs. So that's why anticonvulsant activity is obtained by activating cortex GABA A receptor pockets. Like this. Okay, so that's the reason why when these drugs are used, when you change the structure, there is a possibility of some of the drugs being more sedative, some of the drugs being more anticonvulsant activity or muscle relaxant in their biological activity profile. Okay, it is all again dose dependent. When you give more dose, the compounds, almost all of them will become sedatives only. Okay, so when you reduce the doses slowly, like in case of benzodiazepine, they act as anti-anxiety agents. So this is the way how we have biological activity profile for the benzodiazepines and barbituric acids. Let's see the structure activity relationships for barbituric acid derivatives. As I told you, thousands of barbituric acids were synthesized and screened. So all the data ultimately provided us a rich information regarding structure activity relationships of barbituric acids. Let's see one by one. The first observation is, if you closely see the barbituric acid unit, can you find carboxylic acid? No. Can you find phenolic hydroxyl? No. Then how come this particular compound is showing acidity? It's really surprising. So if you closely observe the structure, this is an amide, because between the 6th carbon and 1st nitrogen, this functional group is an amide functional group. But when two carbonyls, because when an NH is flanked by two carbonyls, so this functional group is what we call it as imide. So when you find this kind of arrangement, there is a possibility of lactam-lactim type of rearrangement over here, because C double bond O is an electron withdrawing group, as well as this is also the same thing. So that's why imide nitrogen, okay, suffers from negative inductive effect from these two functional groups. Thereby the proton over here can be abstracted relatively easily. So that's what gives us these possibilities. One is keto-enol tautomerism between these two, keto-enol tautomerism between these two. Okay, so in this way these structures explains us why the protons, because this is an enol, this is also an enol, that's the reason why this acts as this particular unit acts as an acid. Proton is moving from place to place. But in case of that's the reason why this structure gives us a pK value 7 to 8. This structure is for pK value 11 to 12. And if you see simple barbituric acid, where on 5th position there is no substitution, so that's why you will usually see here CH2. So one of the proton will also participate in enolization, thereby this also contributes to acidity. That's why its pK value is 4. Of course log P value is relatively, all these are non-polar molecules only, but because of this, okay, so the barbituric acid maybe it's not having any kind of biological activity. So disubstitution at 5th position is essential for biological activity. Monosubstitution also will not give you much activity. At least one of the substituent must be alkyl. The other one can be either alkyl or an aryl. As you can see in case of phenobarbital, one of the substitution is a benzene ring, the other one is CH2, C2H5, ethyl unit. In case of secobarbital, we have both the substitutions are alkyl groups only. Increase in length of alkyl substituents at 5th position increases potency. As you can see in diethyl barbituric acid, which is actually the first prepared molecule, if you see its biological activity, it is actually, that's what we call it as barbitone. Its duration of activity is only 3 hours. But when you compare it with phenobarbital, where the duration of activity is more than 8 hours, okay, so as you increase, if you go to secobarbital, it will go up to 12 hours. So the a length of chain increases lipophilicity, thereby it also increases the potency. The total carbon atoms in the substituents at fifth position must not go beyond 8. Okay, so in almost all types of drugs that are approved right now, they contain, if you see the number of carbons over here, benzene 6 carbons, ethyl 2 carbons. So here this is allyl group where 3 carbons are there, and this is isopentyl, 5 carbons are there. 5 plus 3 is equal to 8. 6 plus 2 is equal to 8. So if you go beyond that, the compound will lose its biological activity, reduce the biological activity significantly. And further, if you substitute any kind of, so here if you have an alkyl group, so let's say if you have a keto group over here, it will destroy the biological activity altogether. That's the problem. And one more observation is branching increases biological activity. The next one is replacement of C2 oxygen. So oxygen over here with sulfur increases lipophilicity as well as the biological activity profile also will change. Like in case of pentobarbital and secobarbital, if you change the this oxygen with sulfur, so pentobarbital will become thiopental sodium, thiopental, and secobarbital will become thiamylol. Okay, so here pentobarbital's duration of activity is 10 to 16 hours, whereas thiopental activity is less than 1 hour. It takes 30 to 60 minutes for induction of biological activity, whereas here it takes less than 5 minutes for induction of biological activity, almost instantaneously. If you give the injection of thiopental sodium, within 5 minutes the patient will go into sleep. Okay, so here the log p value is 1.47, whereas the log p value here is 3. Higher lipophilicity facilitates quick distribution into CNS and quick redistribution into other body compartments also. So that could be one reason why quick onset and quick release of activity will be there. So increased lipophilicity reduces time required for onset and reduces duration of activity also. So the short acting or ultra short acting varieties are also very, very important, which are very much useful sometimes as anesthetics, general anesthetics. If you see the NH, though all the positions 1 to 6, all the positions were probed, some of the very important observations only I am mentioning over here. So in the NH over here, NH when you replace it with methyl, it retains biological activity to some extent, like in case of methohexital, where on N1 we have methyl group, whereas if you increase it further, it will lose its biological activity. N1, N3 disubstitution make the compound completely inactive, because when you convert NH and this NH also as NCH3 and NCH3, let's imagine, then ketoenol tautomerism will be gone forever. So ketoenol tautomerism is highly essential for receptor binding activity. If you observe what is GABA, gamma aminobutyric acid, that acid part will have its own type of reception system inside GABA receptor pocket. Okay, that could be one reason why acidic components are needed on these molecules, or proton donating capability is needed for these compounds to remain active. C5 is chiral. Yes, you can see that R and R. Let's say here both the substituents are different, and here the substitution pattern over here is also different. And sometimes one of the substituent can be chiral. So here in methohexital, this part is actually chiral. This carbon is also chiral. So in these, L isomer, what they observed is L isomer is twice as potent as D isomer. Okay, but normally in the market, all these drugs are given as racemic mixtures only. But L isomer is twice as potent as D isomer. Barbiturates, one very, very important point over here is barbiturates enhance GABA activity, means they act like synergistic. They also have intrinsic activity at GABA receptors. This is a very important observation which you have to note down. Let's see the barbiturates that are approved by US FDA, because as I told you, barbiturates were very popular in 1920 to 30. But once the once with the entry of diazepines, barbiturates became obsolete, and hardly 5 drugs are right now being used, approved by US FDA. And these two, thiobendal and thiamylol, are actually sulfur varieties of pentobarbital and secobarbital. Okay, so these are the drugs which are approved by US FDA for clinical usage. We will see about individual category, individual drugs in another lecture, their synthesis, pharmacokinetics, etc. Okay, but before that, let's see a little bit about the metabolism of barbituric acids. The main objective of metabolism, especially for barbituric acids, is to add polar groups. One is to make them more polar, increase polarity so that they can be eliminated. Largely, oxidative desulfuration is the first step for the thiobarbital like drugs, pentobarbital, to give the non-sulfur, otherwise oxyderivatives. And then on aliphatic chains, hydroxylation actually is observed. Phase 1 oxidation actually adds OH groups, which are further, they'll undergo further phase 2 oxidation, phase 2 metabolic reactions like conjugation reactions, so that these conjugated products are eliminated from our body. And like in case of phenobarbital, when a benzene ring is there, unsubstituted benzene, parahydroxylation is usually observed in drugs containing benzene rings. Okay, so this is the way how barbiturates are metabolized and eliminated. Let's see benzodiazepines and their structure activity relationships. As I told you, my friends, thousands of benzodiazepines were synthesized with various combinations and they were tested. Almost 25 drugs are right now approved by US FDA for biological, for clinical usage. They are used both for anti-anxiety, anti-epileptic, and then other categories also. Like that's the reason why in CNS depressant category you will see these drugs, both barbituric acids as well as benzodiazepines, again and again in anti-epileptic category as well as anxiolytic category. Benzodiazepines enhance GABA activity like barbiturates, but unlike barbiturates, they don't possess any kind of intrinsic activity. In the absence of GABA, benzodiazepines cannot be able to produce any kind of biological activity. So they enhance biological activity. So this is the basic structure of benzodiazepines. So this is the diazepine ring, which is fused onto one of the benzene ring, and at 5th position we have the second aryl unit. This is N1, this is N4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so this is the way how we give the numbering. On this benzene ring, we start from here 1 dash, 2 dash, 3 dash and 4 dash. So para position is 4 dash position. Ortho position is either 2 dash or 6 dash positions. Okay, so please remember that numbering. So let's first see the benzene ring AR1. Okay, aryl ring. Aromatic and heteroaromatic ring is essential for biological activity. Here we need to have an aromatic ring or a heteroaromatic ring. But among the drugs that we have in usage, phenyl ring is clearly better than heteroaryl group, and substitution of chlorine or nitro group at C7 enhances biological activity. Okay, without C7 chlorine also it shows biological activity, but if we have a chlorine over here, it shows enhanced biological activity. Substitution at C8, C9 or C6 decreases biological activity. Annealing of 1,2 bond, this one, 1 and 2 bond with electron rich triazole or imidazole ring gives potent drugs, like in case of alprazolam. Okay, so this is the way how one part of benzodiazepines responds to structure activity changes. Now let's see the heterocyclic ring. Substitution on N1 alters pharmacokinetics usually, that is what they observed, but bulky groups like tertiary butyl etc. drastically reduces biological activity because of steric hindrance. C double bond O over here or a proton acceptor at C2 is essential for receptor binding, like whatever we have seen in case of alprazolam or midazolam. Imidazole ring acts as a proton acceptor. So this functional group is group must be coplanar to AR1. Okay, so this entire thing, NH and C double bond O, this part need to be coplanar with the benzene ring over here. Then only fitment happens into the receptor pocket. The C double bond O at C2 can be replaced with C double bond S. Absolutely no problem. Substitutions at C3 methylene or C double bond N partially retains their biological activity, because as we have seen in case of the initial discovery, N4 contains an oxide. Okay, so even if you have an oxide over here, there is no change in biological activity. But on this methylene, smaller substitution can be kept. If you increase these substitutions over here beyond C2, it will lead to antagonistic activities. Neither the 4,5 double bond, that is this one, as well as N4 is needed for biological activity, actually needed for biological activity. So what is needed? AR benzene is needed, NH and C double bond O is needed, and the remaining are meant only for facilitation. So instead of nitrogen, you can even keep a carbon over here without losing the biological activity. That is the meaning of it. The third one is phenyl group at 5th position, that is AR2. 5th phenyl may help in favorable hydrophobic interactions with the receptor, but is not essential for activity. As you will see in case of anxiolytic chapter, where benzodiazepines were totally modified to obtain benzodiazepine-like molecules, which doesn't possess the benzodiazepine pharmacophore completely. Okay, there we will see a complete discussion on the. There you will see those examples also. So it means that AR2 is not essential. Substitution at ortho position is favorable and not para position. So at AR2, a substitution over here C2 dash position actually is gives a favorable orientation, but not at a para position. So friends, this is the way how benzodiazepines became very popular drugs and the structure activity relationships. So friends, I hope you understood the concept of sedatives and hypnotics. In this lecture we have seen the definition for sedatives and hypnotics. They are almost like they can also be called as sleeping pills. They induce sleep. Okay, so here two major categories of drugs are there, like barbituric acids and benzodiazepines are there. Barbituric acids are now very less popular. Only 5 drugs are right now in use, and this category is entirely dominated by benzodiazepines right now. Their main application is sedation, but they can also be used as anxiolytics as well as anti-epileptics. We'll continue this discussion further with individual agents. And friends, see you again in the next lecture. Thank you.